Welcome back, everybody, to the Omniverse Comics Guide podcast. I'm your host, Eric Anthony. I'm very excited for today's episode. Before we begin, I would be remiss not to shout out the omniversecomics.guide website, where some of the things we're going to talk about today, you've got the best reading orders you can find in regards to comic book events, reading reviews, etc., etc. Be sure to visit the site, and you'll find all of our podcasts and videos there. Now, without further ado, today's guest is a bucket list creator for myself. He's one of the most prolific editors, creators in comic book history, probably most famously known for being the youngest published comic book writer of all time. And his tenure as editor-in-chief at Marvel Comics gave fans some of the greatest comic book stories. And he's also one of the creative forces behind the Valiant universe, which those who have listened to this podcast know how much I love Valiant. Jim Shooter, thank you for coming to the Omniverse, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
That's great. Well, I mean, there's a long list of things that we could talk about. Your time in the comic book industry is one of the most influential, easily. Let's go back to the beginning, Jim. You had a love for
All right.
comics, like we said, Legion of Superheroes. You're 13 years old when you get that writing gig. What was your love for
Yeah.
comics? How big was it at the time for you to be able to already come up with something so dense as the Legion of Superhero characters?
Well, I mean, I always loved comics. And when I was a little kid, comics were everywhere. I mean, they were really a mass medium. Every supermarket, every drugstore, every gas station, they had a comic book rack, and
Right.
so I learned to read from comics. A lot of people say that, and with me, it's true. Um, and I read them a lot. I started to get a little bored with the comics that were out there in 1958, 59. That when I was like 8 years old, and because they started seeming all the same, kind of formulaic and everything, and every issue Batman was fighting the Riddler or the Penguin on top of a giant toothpaste tube or a typewriter or something. And yeah, no, really. And then Lois Lane
Yeah.
was always trying to discover Superman's secret identity, and that it just wasn't engaging anymore. And so I didn't stop reading them, but I slowed down for a while. And then the Marvel comics really reawakened my passion for comics. When they came along, and I ran into those for the first time, I couldn't believe it. They were so good and so different. They
Mm.
weren't, at all formulaic. For the first time, a superhero was introduced, and he didn't have his own private headquarters cave, and had already met the love of his life and a good job, and never any worries, except that the Mirror Master's running around or something. Um, so it was unique. It was different. It was revolutionary, and that just got me going. I said, "Wow, this is something that you know I wanted to be involved in it." I mean, I really did. I was a big science kid. I thought I would always grow up to be a scientist, and I still did, even when I was at first working in the comics. And then later, I said, "Why would I want to do anything else? It's fun."
Right, right. Now, you didn't continue like from 13 years old being this prodigy comic book writer. You didn't just continue writing comics. It's something that you left for a little bit and then came back into. So what brought you back into the world of comic books and getting so involved in the publishing side of it for you?
Well, I didn't really leave it entirely willingly. I mean, I'd worked for DC Comics for 5 years between
Hmm.
65 and 70. And uh, I was getting tired of DC because my editor there was Mort Weisinger, and he just was a nasty guy, and it was hard dealing with him. And
Stories are
finally,
legendary about him. Stories about him are
oh yeah,
legendary. Yeah.
and the thing is, it's not just me. I mean, I ask almost anybody who worked with him. I met Alvin Schwartz, who worked wrote Superman in the 50s and I guess early 60s, and he said, "Oh, you wrote Superman too?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, why'd you quit?" I said, "I didn't like this guy Mort Weisinger." He said, "Me too. I quit for the same reason." So, okay. Um, anyway, so I went from DC to Marvel. I went over there, and Stan hired me. Long story short, to work in editorial. I was the only person in editorial besides Stan. And the trouble with that was I had to be in New York. And when you're 18, you're trying to move to New York, and everything's so expensive. You don't have any money, and I couldn't make it. I especially once I saw what the taxes they took out of my paycheck was incredible. And so I finally had to give it up, to go someplace where somebody'd spot me a sandwich, um, and then in Pittsburgh, I was, I just had to get any job I could, just to make a living. But almost right away, I got a call from an advertising agency called Lando Bishopric. And the guy called me, said, are you the kid who writes comics? I said, yeah, that's me. And I started working for Lando. I kept my day job, but I started working for Lando, doing work on the U.S. Steel account and some other big accounts. Eventually, I also did Levi's jeans. It was, and it paid really well. And everything I did was comic book related. I mean, it was all comics format, comics style, a little comic books I made for them and stuff.
Hmm.
So I was still sort of doing comics. I just was
Right.
doing it advertising, and like I said, it paid real well, but I didn't like it. I mean, I had to create a advertisement for U.S. Steel Super C steel joists, and my first question was, "What's a joist?" Here I am trying to sell something I don't even know what it is. so so finally, amazingly, I started getting calls from Marvel and DC, and jumped. I thought, okay, freelancing for DC without Mort Weisinger there. He had already retired. Um, Still had its problems, but it was work. It was all right, and I liked writing it. Uh, the stuff I got from Marvel was interesting because it was done all differently. I always did full scripts and layouts for DC. For Marvel, give them a plot, artwork comes back in the mail. Artwork, pencil artwork. And then I'm supposed to write the dialogue to go with the artwork. Well, what if the guy didn't understand what I meant and he drew something funny? I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know what I was doing. But I figured it out. And then working for Marvel was more fun.
Yeah, it seemed like it would become more fun, especially in the 70s when you
Yeah.
were getting on the Avengers books and things like that. And there were some, I mean, I wasn't alive at the time, but I go back and read retroactively, and I often say the stuff that was happening in Marvel was much more interesting than what DC was going for. There might have been a few characters that they were kind of, going down a path that hadn't been done before. But for the most part, like you said, it was the same sort of recycled stories with Superman and whatnot. But when you get to Marvel, and it seemed like a very uh, the people who were working on it alongside you, your peers, were those first fans of Marvel comics. They were the guys that were young boys or teenagers that grew up reading these stories that captured their imagination. Now you guys become the custodians of this universe, and it's like you take it to another level that hadn't because now there's different imaginations all being involved, whereas before it was mostly Stan and Jack and a few names that were there. But now you've got like this cavalry of guys and gals that are just so excited to work on these characters. What was a day in the life like at Marvel offices when you were there?
Well, what you described, that happened later. When I came in there, it was a little bit of a mess. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, I was hired as editor first, the
Hmm.
only editor. I'm editing 45 color comics a month. Nobody can do that. And it was really kind of chaotic. The people you described who were like early fans of Marvel or working at Marvel, sometimes their only qualification was that they read 1,000 comics. And I mean, no, seriously, I'm telling you,
I
at
appreciate
least,
that.
at least with me, I had worked at DC, and although my editor there, Mort Weisinger, was mean as a snake, he taught me a lot. And
It's usually
I,
how it goes.
yeah, I learned a lot from that guy. And it wasn't only about writing. or stories, or it was he was teaching me production, in-house and printing, distribution, marketing, merchandising, and the business of the business, economics of comics, right, and
Yes.
general economics, and I wonder why do I have to learn all this stuff?
Right.
And his assistant told me, his assistant was E. Nelson Bridwell. He's training you to have a job like his. And I said,
Mm.
what? He's always calling me a moron. Why would he train me to have a job like his? And but apparently he thought I had some potential that way. And I did learn everything, that I was supposed to. I'll give you one little anecdote. When I was
Please.
a senior in high school, after working for Mort for 4 years, when I was a senior in high school, you take a class called economics. At least you did in Bethel Park. And so the teacher's name was Mr. Blackburn. And when we all walked in on the first day of school in 1968, yeah, I guess so. Um, he said, "Everybody sit down. You're gonna take my final exam." And what? Taking a test on the first day, you know? So he passes out this final exam, right? And it was hard. Um, but I understood the terms and I was able to, suss out the answers. And so the next morning when I came in, he said, Shooter, come up here. And I said, all right. So you're the only guy I ever got 100% on my final exam on the first day. He said, so you don't have to take this class. Here's a permanent hall pass. You can go to the library, wherever, study hall, do your homework, whatever. So I had a free period my whole senior year. It's a damn good thing I did because I was working at night and going to school during the day, and sometimes homework got left out.
Hmm.
Uh, but anyway, so that's what I'm trying to say is I had some training. I
Right.
went through the mill with more, not, and also about creative, by the way, writing, storytelling, art. I sat me down with George Klein to learn about inking. Tatiana Wood taught me coloring. Um, I mean, I was getting prepared, I guess, by Mort. Of course, it didn't work out that I ended up there. It worked out that I ended up at Marvel, but all that stuff came in real handy. So it was good to be able to call the printer and use the right words. And all right, so anyway, at the beginning, it was a little bit messy. I grant you, some of those guys were just machine guns of ideas and had great uh, creative skills in some ways. But a lot of them were just, like I said, I don't know. They hadn't had any training at all, and really kind of no discipline. Everything's late. People deliver stuff when they got darn good and ready. And eventually, though, we did build the team you were talking about. I
Yeah.
was able to get all these really great people. Right? Whether they were Claremont was already there. I got Byrne, I got Frank Miller, Walt Simonson, Louise, Archie Goodwin, best of all time. Larry Hamas, like winning the lottery, man. And so I mean, we did then build this place, and I think it was the first time there was no bullpen when Stan was there. It was a tiny little office, and everybody worked at home, and there's only a couple production people. And but when I was there, well, I guess we sort of created the bullpen that never was. I had 14 editors and a lot of creative people on staff. I had John Romita Sr. as my art director. I'm 26 years old. Oh yeah, the Grandmaster Hall of Fame guy. Oh yeah, he works for me. Yeah, it's surreal. But anyway, we did build something wonderful there, and a lot of good things came out of it. I wished I would have been able to continue it, but too successful, I guess. Evil, greedy people wanted to sell the company, and you know, that always messes things up.
Yeah, sometimes you can take something that needs to be fixed and you make it run perfectly the way it should, and then it gets to that point where, well, we can sell it for parts, or we could do this now and make it even, and you get ahead of yourself. But it amazes me when I go through my comic book collection and I get into those, late 70s into the
80s.
80s, and
Yeah.
it's just like whatever movies they make, whatever TV shows they come out with, there's always going to have to be it's in a lot of ways as much the foundation of the Marvel universe forever as what Stan and Jack did, what you and your team put together in those years. I mean, Walt Simonson on Thor, um, Fantastic Four with Byrne, Claremont on X-Men, et cetera, et cetera. I
Yeah,
mean, that's just scratching the surface. That Frank Miller, Daredevil.
the Frank Miller Daredevil, and so many, and then when Frank went on to other things, and Nocenti comes in,
Right,
which did a brilliant job. I mean, we had depth, we had bench depth there, and it was just wonderful for a long time. It was wonderful. I was didn't have to do much teaching. Well, a lot of these guys really that I got really did know what they were doing. Archie, Larry, Louise. You don't have to tell them anything. Walt, all these guys. I mean, I could just conduct the orchestra, just coordinate, you know, talk philosophy, make it mean something, care about it, try to make it resonate with the reader so they can relate to it. I like to say, well, yeah, I know that guy feels, or I never felt that way, and now I understand it. And I was preaching to the choir for the most part, but some of the new kids needed to hear that.
right. The I always like to ask like fellow fans, but also people in your position who were the editor conducting the orchestra, as you said. How do you go about casting the right creators for the book? Is it just a matter of necessity, or do you hope that these creators come to you with a somewhat of a long-term plan where, like, for instance, you got Frank Miller on Daredevil for a couple years. He had a story he wanted to tell. Walt Simonson, the same thing. Chris Claremont had, over a decade of story he want. Was that something that you would look for in a creative team where there's a plan going forward that we can build with, or was it just we got to get these books out month to month?
No,
How did you
I
approach it?
never look. I did have to get the trains on time because when I was there as editor, we had one monthly book that only 6 issues got done in the year. Uh, there were a couple books we had where the creators didn't deliver just because it was all they didn't care. Um, and so we had rush job fill-ins done, and then dreaded deadline doom reprints. I wasn't in charge. There's nothing I could do about it. But it was agony watching this. And so when I came in, I made it a point. We're going to get on time, and that was not real popular at first, but I also at the same time I started getting these good people, and you didn't have to tell Larry that the book should be on time. You didn't have to tell Louise. I mean, I got pros to do
Right.
it. Louise came from Warren, where she was editor in chief. Larry came from DC, and before that, he had a lot of experience, not only with comic book storytelling, but he was in films. He was on TV. He knew the story business. And so, I once we got it to the point where things are on time and we're getting good people. Well, the process of getting good people wasn't all up to me. I mean, I empowered my editors. When I was editor, I didn't have a lot of authority, and I couldn't pick people I wanted, stuff like that. So I made sure that my editors had that authority, and so it was more often it would be an editor finding a creative guy than me. Sometimes it was me. But to answer part of your question, the thing is, the good ones always come with ideas and plans, and I certainly didn't want the people who just wanted to hack out a few bucks and make a little money and go. So yeah, when Frank Miller walks in the door, and even when he was brand new and raw, you could just feel the passion. This guy loved it, and give me people who are passionate. That's a good start. My anecdote is that, and this is based on a real thing. You walk down the hall and you see two adults arguing at the top of their lungs, who is stronger, Spider-Man or Colossus? And the first thought that crosses your head is, "Oh, grow up." And the second thought is, "No, don't care that much. Be that passionate." And uh, My guys, almost all were. There's a couple of bad apples here and there, but when you have 400 freelancers and 14 editors and all kinds of
Sure.
other people, sooner or later, it's gonna get some cranky guy. But yeah, I mean that was so it was me and them, and we always looked for the best people, and we always found that the best people came with the right instincts and usually lots of plans and ideas. With Thor, with Walt, the sales of Thor were falling, and to me, Thor's like one of our mainstays. And so I went to the editor, who was one of those people who did not have passion, and I said, what are we going to do about this? And he said, everything you can do with Thor has already been done. I said, I ought to fire you right now, because if you think that, you can't work here. You know, no, what I meant was, and he tries to backpedal. And so word spreads that I'm looking for somebody to do Thor, or looking for a change in Thor. And Walt called me and said, I'll do it. And I said, let's see, Walt. Yeah, okay. Okay, Walt Simonson wants to do it. That seems like a good idea. So he came in and he told me what he had in mind, and it was kind of radical and crazy and stuff. And I thought, all the stuff that can be done with Thor hasn't been done, has it? And so he did the Beta Ray Bill thing, and he turned Thor into a frog and all that stuff. And it was great. And the sales shot up. It became one of our top sellers. Um, but that's exactly what I want. I mean, my basic contribution to the success of Thor was having the wit to say yes, to his plan, which was kind of radical. But I thought, we're Marvel Comics, so we can't swing for the fences. Nobody can.
Yeah. Do you think there was something about that particular amount of time that had passed between the creation and inception of those characters? Because we're closing in and around like 30 years or so, is that right? Or 25
It
years
was
or so?
20 plus, because I
20
was there.
plus.
1986 was the 25th anniversary, and I was there at night. And by that time, I was the editor for 40% of Marvel's existence.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, they it was 20 some years, and yeah, I like I said, some of the guys who showed up, especially before I came, they didn't bring a lot with them. They'd read 1,000 comic books, and some of the ones that they created before I took over were just kind of regurgitating the same old stuff, which is what the whole industry seems to be doing now. And no new ideas. They just keep doing iterations and permutations of the characters. And you got 6 Spider-Men running around, and how many universes, and Earth 200, and all that.
What
Guys.
would be just for the fun of it, what would be something that you would do as an editor today in regards to these characters? Because you said like they're regurgitating a lot of the stories. There's been numerous Secret Wars done that are just kind of like a fresher version of what you already did.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of times to press the refresh button, they change the race of the character or something about their ideologies, right, to match today's
Or
whatever's
make
happening.
Thor a girl, or
And sometimes it works. Sometimes those stories are good, but when I think back to what was happening in the 80s, very fresh ideas, like you made Daredevil have a ninja background, which was
yeah,
very
which makes
drastic.
sense. Yeah, I
But
thought
it
that was good.
but
Frank thought that up all by himself.
exactly. Like so it was very so is it just a matter of every decade has its own thing that if you were part of the last decade, you're just not into, or do you find that there is a lack of imagination today because it seems like the best stories have been told?
Well, there was a lack of imagination going on uh, when I first started there as editor, and I did my best with what authority I had to try to help. Once I got all these great people, there was sure no lack of imagination going on there, and we were really killing it, and we were 70% of the market in a growing market. Uh, DC had fallen from 30% to 18%, but because the market grew, largely because our books were good, because the market grew, 18% was bigger than 30% used to be, if you understand. I mean, because the
Hmm.
market grew.
People are
Uh,
going to the shelf to see what
Yeah,
else is there,
and
right?
yeah,
It benefits everyone.
and so I think we obviously the direct market had a lot to do with that, but I think we helped them grow and they helped us grow because we were doing good stuff that was bringing people into the shops, and so there were more shops every month, and so and the rising tide lifted all the boats, which was great. And
Hmm.
P.S. DC didn't they didn't just fold their cards. I mean, they started fighting back. They're doing
Yeah,
watch. They get Frank to come and do Dark Knight, and then, I mean, so it was a good time for the industry as a whole. I mean, then all these little indies start popping up because once the direct market was big enough, and a publisher didn't have to deal with the newsstand, which was insanely corrupt, um,
mm,
difficult to deal with. But with the direct market, that's solicited, you send the books, that's it. And so it made a venue for Cerebus, for ElfQuest, for
right,
Distant Soil, for Turtles,
right,
and that was a great thing. So there was all this new talent coming in, and all these people self-publishing. And you know what? They turned out to be our farm club because a
right.
lot of the guys they'd start out there and then they'd want to do Spider-Man or whatever. Fine. My attitude was let's help these guys because one of my editors said, why are you helping First Comics get started? And I said, because if we can't, on a level playing field, if we can't beat any of these guys, we don't deserve it. So, and I figured that it would kind of segment the brand. I mean, it would First Comics was going to do stuff that we would never do. But maybe somebody comes in to the store to buy American Flag and they try Daredevil and they like that, you know,
Yeah,
and it's a lot of cross pollination going on there, and I thought that was wonderful. I thought it was great, and like I said, if one of those guys was good enough to win, let them win because they deserve it. And we never had any serious problem with that, but at any rate, it was a good time for comics. And there was a lot of ideas and a lot of people who cared, and that's what I wanted. And it did work out. And like you said, a lot of the cinematic universe and the foundations of Marvel, were built then by good people. Um, I disagree with the, making radical changes in the characters because to me, I think you should respect the creator's intentions.
yes, I
uh,
agree.
Stan, Jack, and Joe Simon, they never, ever intended for Captain America to be a Hydra guy or a Nazi. No. I mean, that to me is like they're spinning in their graves because that just never should have happened. Uh, Other things like Thor being a girl, like create a new female character, but don't change Thor. That's not what Jack and Stan wanted. And I knew both of those guys very well. I can tell you pretty authoritatively how they
Yeah.
felt about their characters. Um, and I got to know Joe Simon a little bit too. What a great man. Um, anyway,
No, I appreciate that because it's good to hear from people who were in the rooms having to make these difficult decisions as far as what would make us refresh and sell and get people's attention. And really what it always is a good story, right?
yeah,
Good
good
stories is
story,
going to
well told. That's
right.
the secret. It's been the secret of storytelling for 40,000 years. All right.
Exactly.
Ever since language was invented.
Yeah,
It'll be the secret 40,000 years from now if we stick around.
right. You mentioned the fact that you learned so much from Mort Weisinger, even though he was a jerk to all of his employees. But then even you went and did like comic strip work and things like that in the advertising world. How helpful would that have been? Now that you mention all of these things, I can only imagine that that's what really made you even better fit for the job because during understanding the publishing and the economics of the comic book world, and then understanding actual advertising for things you may not even understand what you're advertising. Now you get to marvel at a time where a lot of like multimedia and like the Transformers toys are
Yeah,
coming into the United States. And you were I rewatched one of the Toys That Made Us on Netflix,
yeah.
and I had it had been mentioned to me, but I didn't realize that you on the American side of things, you created that Cybertron
Yeah,
world, that whole
I did
basis
the
of
yeah, the foundation story, Cybertron, the war between the robots, the fleeing to Earth, the resource need for resources, the Witwikis, their relationship with the robots, I mean, a lot of stuff, and explain why cars turn into robots, which is robot robot beings who had never understood that there was creatures of flesh.
Mhm.
They come to Earth and they look around and they say, well, the dominant life form here seems to be vehicles, and so they want to fit in, so they make themselves look like vehicles. And they eventually find out that's not true, but that's all right. It was working for them, and a lot of little things like that. I mean, because the Japanese invented the technology, but they didn't have any backstory. The
Right.
characters didn't have American names or English names. Um, I didn't do the names and stuff. I did sort of just the bare foundation, and then Bob Budiansky did everything else. He named all the characters. He codified their powers. He gave them personalities. He created new characters like Circuit Breaker. I mean that's same way with GI Joe. I contributed
Right.
a little tiny bit at the beginning, and then Larry took it from there. So, but those were good times. And to me, I think I did the first comic book based on a toy, which was Captain Action back in 1966
Wow.
for DC Comics. My editor, who called me a moron all the time, called me up and said, I want you to create a new series for us. I said, oh, wow, me? Yeah, a new character, new series. I said, great, so I'm starting already to think of, wow, what could I do? And he says, all right, he says, his name is Captain Action. He's got Action Boy as his partner, and he's got this action car and an action cave. And I'm like, what? And his pet is a panther. Okay. And, I'm like, what is, and she says, it's a toy that already exists. And you have to develop it. So it has backstory, personality, you have to justify all this. And oh, okay. So I did the best I could, and came out all right. I mean, the toy didn't last long, so the book didn't get much support from the toy, and I only did 2 issues, and then Gil Kane took over because I was busy with the Legion and the Superman characters. Um, so having done that,
Mhm.
wasn't like a shock to me that doing a comic based on a toy. Denny O'Neil hated the idea. He didn't want any association with toys. Somehow it was more dignified to write Batman or Daredevil than it was to write about Transformers. I don't know, but it was a good thing, and I think it really helped us the same way Star Wars did. Roy got that for us, Roy Thomas, and if he hadn't, Marvel would have died in 1977. But Star Wars, which came out
Wow.
in the middle of 77, it
Yeah.
sold so well all by itself. It propped Marvel up. It, so instead of being in a death spiral with all the other companies, we were the healthiest patient in the terminal ward. And what Roy did with Star Wars gave me a year to turn it around.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I mean, he bought me a year. I think he's one of my heroes. So anyway, that's it was really bad in '78. I mean, Warren went out of business. Harvey published sporadically, and they stopped for a while and never published much more. Archie went all reprint, no new material. Um, Charlton went out of business, and on one day in June, DC canceled 40% of their line. 40%. So there's a
So
lot of talent walking the streets,
so what
a lot of
if you don't,
talent.
just out of
Yeah.
curiosity, because I hear about that, the comic book industry going through these booms and busts and all of these type of things. So in 77, 78, what was it about the industry? Was it the corruption of the newsstand and spinner rack type of business model that just wasn't sustainable and that it was better for a direct market so that things could be tracked and controlled better? Or what was happening that was
It
making
was a
these business?
combination of ingredients. It was like I said, there were good people, but there were a lot of people in the business whose chief qualifications they read a lot of comics.
Mm.
and really didn't have any training or discipline. That was one. So what that meant was the a lot of the books weren't good. I remember as when I was an editor sitting there with Roger Stern and a couple other people looking at the wall that had all the latest covers on it, trying to figure out which ones you could even read. And we came up with four out of 45.
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, we just didn't feel like a lot of good stuff was being done. And all right, that's one thing. It was all newsstand, and the newsstand was corrupt.
Right.
By that, I mean, you'd you'd send books to these ID wholesalers around the country, and they didn't have to return unsold copies. They could give you an affidavit. So they're going to lie.
Right.
They're going to sell 10,000 copies and tell you they sold 3,000, and they'll pay you for 3,000, and then they make extra profit. But so that was a nightmare, and then on top of that, there was there's a lot of theft and corruption going on at Marvel. I mean, one guy was embezzling $250,000 a year, and we had a lot of little petty theft. The receptionist, she opened the subscription envelopes and for the subscription department. She had nothing else to do most of the day, so she would be the one who opened the envelopes and sorted them. You know, well, anytime there was cash in an envelope, she just put in her purse.
Oof.
And she was stealing, I don't know, $50, $100 a week, and I would be going to conventions because that first year I was there as editor in chief, I was out there preaching the gospel, man. I was out there saying it's getting better, give us a try, every place that would have me, you know, and of course a lot of places would have me because I had an expense account, I could pay for myself. But the thing is, I was on the road all the time, just trying to talk to people, get people interested again, because sales had gotten so bad. Well, I kept getting this complaint at various conventions and stuff. Hey, I subscribed and I didn't get any books. I'm like,
Mm.
I gotta look into that.
Man.
So I did look into it, and almost by accident, I discovered that our receptionist was, just stealing all the cash and throwing the forms away. The way I discovered is I worked late. There was one night I was walking out while the cleaning lady was in the reception room, and I see her dump the receptionist's trash into her big bin, and it's all subscription forms. What? They said, wait, what's this? And so I said, Anna, give me a bag. I need a bag. So she's looking at me like I'm out of my mind. And I put all of those subscription forms out of her bin into this bag. It's a big bag. And the next day, I showed the lady in charge of subscriptions, and she just denied the evidence of her eyes. She said, so and so wouldn't do that. No, there must be, she said, a lot of people send in forms with no money because it's kids. I said, a lot of these aren't kids, and look, you can see where the quarters were taped to the form.
Right.
Didn't get any traction with her, and I mean, I outranked her, but she didn't work for me. I didn't really have any authority.
Right.
So I went to her boss and dumped the stuff on his desk, and he's like, "What the hell?" And he realized very quickly, as I told him, that the receptionist was stealing subscription money. Well, he made well, they didn't prosecute her; they just let her go.
Right.
But he made sure that there would be no more situations like that. And but there was lots of other little things. I had people whose names you would recognize using our mailroom to send all their personal stuff out. And the guy who ran the mailroom, he didn't know. He's like, "Isn't this guy an artist? All right, fine."
Right.
And I had this one clown. He was uh, he was freelance, but what he was doing is he was going to move from New York to Georgia. So every day he'd come in with like a big heavy box of books or other items, and was having all this stuff shipped to his new place in Georgia by Marvel on Marvel's dime. I mean, sending a box of books to Georgia in those days was not cheap. And when I found that out, I said, "You're out of here. Get out of here. Never come back." And um, stuff like that, all kinds of crap like
So
that.
everyone was just taking advantage wherever they could take advantage because they just didn't think it mattered.
Double vouchering, hacking. There's
Right.
all hacking going on. I mean, basically because things were late, that put us in a situation. I mean, us. I mean, the people before me in a situation where it had to be done overnight, the last minute, and even still, it would miss shipping sometimes. So there were a few people who took advantage of that.
Sure.
Just I mean, I'll tell you, Bill Mantlo, he he was fast as lightning when he wanted to be, but he'd do it overnight, sure, because he'd get the same paycheck. And if he had words on paper, how can they argue with it? I mean, there's
Right.
if you tell them to do it overnight, you can't say this is not quite Shakespeare. You know,
Right. Right.
there were other guys who were just good soldiers. I mean, the Vince Coletta gets a lot of heat and a lot of grief. Oh, he hacked. No, he didn't. No, he worked for the production manager. He
Right.
worked for Marvel's production manager, and that was his boss. And he followed orders. Production
Right.
manager say, "Vinny, ink on paper, 3 days," and
Get it
Vinny did it.
done.
He did it better than anyone else could have done it in 3 days or even a week. I mean,
Right.
he gave it his best, but if you have 3 days, and he was a good soldier, he wasn't going to let him down. So at any rate, I mean, things weren't good. There was corruption. It was a mess. And then on top of that, Neil Adams decides he's going to start a guild and go on strike against Marvel. It's like, oh, gee, Neil, who's a buddy of mine, Neil,
Right.
Rick, give me a chance here. I'm going to fix things. Just give me a chance. He said,
Right.
"Well, I think that'll put pressure on them." I said, "It's not going to put pressure on them. They're going to close the company. If you're losing $1 million a year and you're a little company, the bosses they don't feel any need to be published comics. To them, it might as well be widgets. They don't give a damn.
Yeah.
Uh, Nobody upstairs with me ever opened a comic book. That
Right.
some of them didn't even know how to read a comic book.
Right.
I had the vice president of international licensing call me up, and she was so excited. She said, "I just have to tell you," she said, "I just made the greatest deal for Wonder Woman." I said, "Gail, we don't own Wonder Woman." And she said, "What do you mean we don't know?" I said, "Why don't you check the list?"
Oh
Another
man.
vice president of promotions lady, she calls me up. She said, "Hey, Jim, how many stories are in each comic book?" I said, "How many do you think, Nancy?" And she said, "I don't know, 4 or 5." And I said, "One, and it's usually continued." You know,
So they
I
had
said,
no clue. They had
"No."
no clue
She
what their
had
business
never
was
opened a
under.
comic book, never. And she was in charge of promoting Marvel,
Wow.
vice president of promotions. I don't know, it was an uphill fight, I'm telling you. But once I started getting the good people there, it got easier because, like I said, I
Yeah.
didn't have to tell Archie anything. I mean, I didn't have to tell Larry or Louise or Carl Potts or Bob Budiansky, Jim Salicup. I had some great, great people. And once I started getting some professionals in there, then I could worry about the stuff that only I could worry about. And
Right.
so, it one way or another, we got it going. Actually, once we got it going, boy, it was there was an era there where things were going well. People were making money because my deal with the president was if I make money, in other words, if I beat my projections, or if I save money, I want to use that money. And he said he didn't think either of those things were possible. He said, "I don't care what you do, just don't lose money." And I said, "All right, it's a good deal. That's a very free hand."
Right.
So as we started having more resources, we introduced benefits and rights, health insurance, life insurance. All you do is 3 jobs a year as a freelancer, and you're entitled to all these things, and royalties eventually, and various other kinds of incentives. I invented combat pay. It used to be like book was late, and they just find somebody, get it done fast, um, and that they just got the regular rate. And I said, "No, if through no fault of your own, you got to do work extra hours on inking a job, we'll pay you rate and a half." If it's really bad, we'll pay a double rate. And there was a few times we paid triple rate, but we always made shipping. Always in 10 years, we never missed once.
And that
Okay.
makes a big difference, just even for fandom who go to the stores regularly and get their, it makes people stick with
Yeah.
the product.
If that book's supposed to be there, it better be there.
Yeah.
Because if somebody comes into the store and it's not, that's so disappointing.
And they
You know,
forget about it. As a person who's gone every Wednesday, there's been times like, hey, is this book coming out? No, it's delayed for 5 months. I'm probably not going to want to read it. It
no.
it's just I'll read it eventually when they collect it somehow. But if I'm collecting month to month, it really throws everything off. It seems like it's not a big deal, but you mentioned before that Roy Thomas got was able to get you a year to
Yep.
survive because of
Yep.
Star Wars. So within that year, maybe you mentioned it already in cleaning house and getting down to brass tacks of what the problem was. But what were some of the things that you did within that year that gave you another year to survive? Like what was the creatively one of some of the things that you were able to do?
Well, I mean, I looked for every way I could to save money. Rooting out the corruption saved a lot of money. I Getting on time saves a lot of money because you schedule your time at the separator, you schedule your time at the printer. If that book doesn't show up, you pay anyway. And
Right.
so then when the book does show up, you pay again to paying double. In my first month, we were supposed to publish 45 color comics. Only 26 made it out the door. That means we're paying double for 19 books.
Yeah, that's
Um,
not a good business
Getting rid
model.
of that was that was a good thing. And then once I had this money, I raised the pay for the artists. I raised the pay for the writers and all the other creators. There were colorists getting $2.25 a page. Well, I fixed that, and and before me, those title logos on the cover, Daredevil, whatever. You know how much they paid the guys for that? $22. $22 to design and execute a logo. The first one I bought, I paid $1,500 for. It should have been more, but that was the best I could do. Because that's a trademark thing. They're going to make money on this,
Right.
and you can't. Sorry, lettering is work for hire by definition. So I wasn't couldn't include them in royalties or anything like that, but I sure could pay them better, and I did.
Right.
And same thing. So when you're paying the guys more and word spreads, you can make money at Marvel. People start showing up, and the more benefits we had. I mean, I get a simple benefit. I said, if this is work for hire, and they won't let me change that. This is work for hire. Okay. Why can't it be good work for hire? And so I said, for instance, Marvel always provided the drawing paper, the art boards to the artists. Why? Because they didn't want pencilers trying to save money by using crappy paper. So
Right.
Marvel provided the paper. And I said, wait a minute. If it's work for hire, you have to provide all materials, okay, according to the law. And so I got in an argument with the financial officer over there. He said, it's going to cost a lot of money. I said, that's the price of work for hire. And the lawyer joined the meeting and he said, he's right. so, so, so anyway, we started providing pens, brushes, erasers, whiteout, anything you need. And if you go to buy a Winsor Newton brush, you better take a couple $100 with you. Um, that was a good benefit. And I said, if you're sending stuff to Marvel, I'll pay a shipping, your postage, whatever. If you call Marvel in business, and in those days it was per call you were billed. If you call Marvel in business, I'll pay for your phone calls. If I ask you to come into the office, I'll pay a train fare, and we'll buy you lunch. And if I ask you to come from far away, we'll pay your transportation. We'll put you up in a nice hotel, and we'll feed you. And so it was a benefit. It was a good benefit. I mean,
I think something like that only gives people an impetus to say, well, they've supplied me with everything I need to succeed.
right.
So let me give them that work that they're asking for now. That's
Yeah.
how I see it in my own line of work, right? If someone's giving me all my tools that I need to get the job done and you give me the materials,
Yeah.
what's my excuse now?
Yeah. Especially, that because we were getting better people. I mean, I don't, even if he wasn't paid as well, Walt Simonson would never give you less than his best. Archie Goodwin, any of those people. So the fact that they were being rewarded at least better than they had been. I mean, I wish it could have been even better, but I mean that it certainly didn't dampen their enthusiasm, and it did perk up some of the people who, you know, were always looking for other work outside of comics. They said, "Well, why should I do that? It's great here." I had one time somebody, I don't know who or what, but somebody was mad at me for something. They filed a complaint uh, with the I think it was the Writers Guild, might have, they were whatever, some kind of Creators Guild, a real one, real world one, you know. And so they sent one of their agents to my office to find out, you know, why we were screwing people. And I laid out all the benefits and rights and everything. That's another thing, rights. If you created a character while I was there, you own 20% of it forever, of the adjusted gross forever. And that came in real handy for Bill Mantlow's family because he had a tragic accident and he wasn't able to work anymore. But he happened to have created Rocket Raccoon, so
There
the
you
money
go.
was very useful. You know, I mean, once I spelled out all of our benefits, the guy closes his notebook. He says, I think I want to work here. I said, well, you know, we're doing the best we can, you know, but we're not screwing anybody.
Yeah.
Never set out to hurt anyone.
Well, I mean, it seems like you're playing as fair as you could possibly be in a situation that you inherited a very difficult, unorganized situation and tried to make, like you said, all the trains run on time. I want to ask you about Archie Goodwin because
Oh yeah,
you had mentioned before the greatest of all time.
greatest
During your
editor of all time, and by one of the greatest writers.
Yeah, and I had a question from a friend of mine, friend of the show, comic book creator himself, Sam Noir, was asking about Epic Comics. During your time there, you guys launched what was something an imprint that was very much ahead of its time because it was kind of a precursor to what would become Vertigo and Image and all these other indie lines. But this was something under the Marvel umbrella that was run by Archie, if memory serves correctly,
Yeah.
and it gave creators ownership of some of the stories that they would want to tell that might have been off the beaten path. Can you tell me a little bit about the brain trust
Well,
behind Epic?
yeah, when I was still just editor, um, Stan got to know me a little bit. I was writing the Spider-Man newspaper strip with him, and so we talked a lot, and he kind of got to know me, got the feeling that maybe I knew what I was doing. Um, and so the people from Metal Hurlant came to Marvel, interested in having Marvel be the U.S. publisher of Metal Hurlant, which would be called Heavy Metal. And they of course asked for Stan. Stan didn't have anything to do with the comic books at that point. He was strictly doing the cartoons, movies, TV stuff.
Right.
He wasn't even on the organizational chart. So anyway, he asked me if I'd uh, join him, and I did. And we're looking at this stuff, and he told the people, "Well, we'll get back to you." And he said, "What do you think of this?" And I said, "Well, it's it's beautiful art. It's a little risque and very violent." He said, "Yeah, I don't know if Marvel Comics should be doing a book like this." And I said, "Why don't we do one that's not gory and sexy? Why don't we do one that's story driven? Could be a little more adult or much more adult than the newsstand comics, but you know, let's fight back with story." And so we hired a guy. Actually, Stan recommended the guy. He didn't work out. He was a train wreck. And so when I let him go, Stan said, "Who are you going to get?" I said, "Well, the best guy in the world is Archie Goodwin, but I don't think he wants to come back and work for his former assistant. I mean, that's kind of awkward." And so he said, there must be some way we can get him. And the way I got him is I said, "Look, there's nothing I can tell you that you don't already know. So I'm not going to bother you." I said, "But I happen to know that the reason you didn't, stick around as editor in chief was because you just don't have any interest in all the bureaucracy, all the bean counters and lawyers and licensing people and stuff. These are just because I see your eyes glaze over, you know. I said, I'll do all that. I'll pave the road because I'm doing it anyway for the
Mhm.
comics. What's one more book, you know? So we published Epic Illustrated magazine,
Mhm.
run by Archie, and I pretty much left him alone. I got him an assistant. I said, you know, you don't have to even go shopping outside for an assistant. If you choose somebody who's already here, I mean, steal one of the other editor's assistants, they'll get a new one, and you get the person you want. So he picked Mary Jo Duffy, and she turned out to be really good. The thing is, because it was kind of a promotion, her previous boss, previous editor, they were happy for her, you know, to get some. They was okay. They'd find another assistant. So first we were publishing Epic Illustrated magazine. I told Archie when he came in, I said I tried to get a Frazetta cover for our first issue. I said I called the Frazettas, and as soon as I said I was from Marvel, Ellie hung up on me. I said, he says, I'll take care of it. Picks up the phone, dials. He says, hey, Ellie, it's Archie. Before we know it, we have two Frazetta covers. And, you know, I mean, everybody loved Archie. Everybody
That's all I ever
was,
hear. What was it
yeah.
about him in a like maybe briefly? What was it so special about him that everybody who talks about Archie Goodwin, there's never a bad word said about that man?
He was a fine man, and he was funny. He was friendly. He would, in his subtle way, he would teach you every day. I mean, you couldn't spend 10 minutes in the room and not walk out smarter. I mean, he was, you know, he was a good guy, and he was a down to earth guy. I mean, he was the master of the pratfall. I mean, I'm telling you, you know, he one time we were having a dinner, there's a bunch of staff people. That's when we were gonna move to a new office. So that Friday night, we all went down to the Chinese joint and had a little party. And so Archie, you know, he's like the first to give up, get up to go, and he goes, bam, right down on his face. And everybody, you know, and they run. People are rushing over to him and stuff, and he gets up laughing his tail off because he was a perfect pratfall, you know, and he could do all kinds of stuff like that. And so, you know, not only was a great guy, he made people laugh. And Mike Zack used to say, let's see, no finer writer, no finer editor, no finer man. I think that would people would agree with that. I think, you know, we'll ask you know, ask Louis. But great guy, and really okay. So he was doing Epic Illustrated. Boy, it was good. It was. I mean, he was so creative, so graphically aware. Each issue had a different treatment of the logo, but it was same Epic logo, and always innovative stuff. Got some really great people to work for him. Well, then after a while, Starlin and Simonson and Miller came to me and they said, why can't we do continuing series that are creator owned? Because if you did it for Epic, as long as it was being published, we control the publishing rights. But after that, you got everything back. It
Right.
was you controlled all the rights. And I don't know what rights we had for media stuff. I don't not probably not much, but it was all about publishing. Anyway, so Miller and Simonson and Starlin come in. They say, well, why don't we do comic books? I said, we could do that. So I go to Goodwin. I said, Arch, great idea. Epic Comics. And he yells at me. He says, I got too much to do already. So I backed off and I thought, who can I get to do this? So I asked Milgram if he'd be interested. Yeah, he'd love to do it. And so I thought, all right, okay, you know. The next morning, Archie comes storming into my office, like, "How dare you give Epic Comics to Milgram? I'm the guy who does the creator own, you know." And I'm like, "Just make up your mind, you know." And I said, "Fine, Arch, it's yours." I said, "I'll get you another assistant. I'll help you any way I can. You tell me what you need." And well, Milgram then was upset because he was well, you know, looking forward to doing this. And so you'll notice on the first issue of Dreadstar, Milgram gets like a co-editor credit, just to
Sure.
just to smooth his feathers a little. Because I said to him, I said, I'm going to give it back to Archie. He said, you can't take it from me. I said, yes, I can. And I am. And you know, it's like you know, because Archie, like I said, he was the best. and he did some really wonderful stuff with Epic Comics. And I did get him a second assistant and tried to find ways to help him.
Moonshadow from Jim DeMatteis was on Epic, right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
with I
I
think
love that book.
John J. Muth
Muth.
did
Yes. Yeah.
paintings.
Great
Yeah,
book. So different and so refreshing, especially when you like if that book came out today, it would be refreshing. But to think that it was being published in the mid 80s when, for the most part, people still associated comic books with the newsstand, to know that that kind of thing is out there was pretty avant-garde for its time. So I mean, that there's something to be said about Epic
yeah.
Comics and what you guys accomplished with it.
That was one of only two times where I ever, you know, interfered with Archie. I mean, uh, uh, Ademateus showed me this artwork and told me what his story was, and he said well, Archie wasn't interested. And I said, "What?" Huh? So next time I saw Archie, I said his office was the opposite corner. I said, why don't you like this Moonshadow thing? Looks pretty good to me. And he was saying, well, he didn't think it would sell and this and that. And I said, maybe give it a try. And I didn't ram it down his throat or anything, but I, kind of cajoled him into it. Well, that was minor interference. Then when we were going to do Electra Assassin, uh, started out being a novel, and then a story grew, and it was going to have to be a limited series. And so I asked Archie. I said, "Why don't you do this? I want the A team on this because it's Miller and Sienkiewicz. B, you know, we could use a successful Epic comic because Epic was doing all right, but the regular comics are booming.
Right.
And so inevitably, this is why Archie hates bean counters. Inevitably, they would say, "Well, why are we even bothering with this? Why don't we just do more, regular Marvel comics?" I get that every day, and then I'd have to explain the prestige of having creator online and stuff. And this is what helps bringing talent in that wouldn't come, but then maybe they'll do a Marvel book, and
Right.
fighting that fight often. And it was getting to the point where even the president of the company was the only guy who could overrule me. He starts asking about it. And so I guess other vice presidents are going to him and saying, circulation guy, the financial guy saying, why would we bother with this? So I thought, okay. So I told Archie, we need to do this as an epic comic. And he says, it's not creator owned. I don't want to do that. And I said, Arch, you need a hit right now. You know, uh, we got to do something that, big seller.
Yeah.
Will be. Well, it was. I was sold many hundreds of thousands of copies an issue. I think I
That
don't know,
team in itself, right? Is
four or 500,000. Yeah,
yeah.
and if I had stayed at Marvel, we would have done something like that every year. Every year we would have picked a character or a group or something like that, and done a little epic comic series, a little more adult, little very special one, especially with Archie editing, and just to keep epic alive because that brought in so much money. I mean that bought him a gear or two. Um, so I would have kept doing that, but they didn't, and Archie left, Carl Potts left, everybody left.
Yeah.
Later after me, you know.
But I mean, still, those books, a lot of people, whether it's Dreadstar or Moonshadow or like you said, Electro Assassin, those books still have a shelf life where people refer back to them and talk about how great Epic was
Yeah, and
in
Dreadstar
its
sold
time.
pretty well. I mean, some
Right.
of the other ones a little more artsy. Archie was right. Moonshadow didn't, it more than broke even, but it really wasn't a giant
It's
sell.
it's
He knew
something
that.
down the line that like, now it comes back in Moonshadow is, this piece of artwork that people want to own and experience. But it makes sense why at the time it would have been a tough sell, but it's still remarkable that you had the ambition to say, give this a try. This should be out there.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't want to interfere with Archie, but I thought I wanted to put in a good word for that. And he didn't really argue. I don't think he was happy, but I guess he figured, it was really funny. I mean, I left him like so alone that when we got this new guy, Mike Hobson, in, and they called him publisher. He was actually, they were keeping him on tap because Galton wanted to start a children's book line. That Galton, that's the president. He wanted to start a children's book line. Didn't have the authority yet, but he got this guy Hobson, who came from Scholastic and was, renowned publishing executive. And he, just to keep him on tap, he tucked him in, hit him in the comics, and he called him publisher. I didn't report to him. I reported to the president. So did he. And he had no obligation to help me. But while he was waiting for his real job to start, he helped me all the time. And it was a godsend, because it was a seasoned publishing executive. He helped me with contracts and stuff. And I was a kid, come on, I was
Yeah,
26 when I started, so I was in my early 30s. I
it's a
didn't know
big
everything.
undertaking.
Yeah, but
Very
anyway,
big.
Mike, he said, "What's up with Goodwin?" He says, he's all like on his own here over here. And I said, "Yeah, well, I didn't want to put him in that situation of, reporting to his former employee." And he says, "Yeah, we need to fix that." And I said, "Oh, all right, And so he called Archie, asked Archie if he could come. I got Jim in here. Can you come in and talk to us for a minute? So Archie shows up, stands in the door. So what can I do for you? And Mike says, you work for Jim, right? And he said, yeah. He just walks away. I think he always knew, I
Right.
think he always knew that it wasn't, he wasn't same level and, you know, just affiliated with us. He was, he worked for me. And like I said, at least I was smart enough to leave him alone because you didn't ever really tell him anything.
And that's the type of, like, those are the best type of employees to have. Like, they know what their job is to do. They're going to do a good job all the time, give you an honest day.
Yeah.
And in your case, you probably learned a lot working under him. So what is it that you're going to have to go and tell him to do, like you said, right? Every now
Yeah.
and then you'll come and say this is the direction we have to go as the guy that's going to take the heat for it, but just work
or
with me.
or or warning him that if we don't do something big, that
Exactly.
it's going to be trouble. And but let me tell you an Archie Goodwin story. He
Please.
did stuff like this sometimes. Um, uh, I, the Galton, the president, used to pass through our floor on his way in and out every day. There was a staircase that connected the upstairs floor, and it was easier for him to come in the kind of the back door of the building, walk through our floor, go up the stairs to his office than it was to go all the way around the building to the front, take the elevator. He took the freight elevator in the back. Anyway, sorry. So he passes through our floor on the way in and on the way out every day. And I guess after a while, he sort of notices that at 9 a.m., kind of very few people are at their desks or drawing boards or whatever. And that annoyed him because he thought he was running an insurance office or something. And, comic book creators, or even the staff people, they'll come in 9:30, quarter to 10. If it starts getting way after 10, then I would say, hey, you can't do that. But they'd also be there at 8 o'clock at night sometimes,
Right.
Um, nobody short shrift on the hours. I mean, it was everybody put their hours in, trust me. And the editors too. Like Louise would come in at 10. Yeah, I didn't care. She was there at 7 o'clock, you know?
Right. Right.
So anyway, Galton issues a decree that you must be at your desk at 9 a.m. And of course, he walks through every day at 9 a.m. so he could see if anybody wasn't there. So I told all the guys, I said, guys, look, everybody must be here at 9 and don't think that, well, everybody else will be so I can take a morning off because everybody will think that. I said, you must be at your desk at 9 o'clock. And they're all moaning and groaning. And, I said, it'll blow over. I said, he'll forget, it's okay. We just do this for a couple of weeks.
Right.
So the next morning, I was always there at 7 in the morning. Next morning, I'm sitting at my desk, and at the stroke of 9, I hear this someone at my door say, "My door's open," but I hear a voice, "Hey!" I look up, and there's Goodwin, and he's dressed like 'twas the night before Christmas. He's got the old-fashioned sleeping cap on. He's got a men's nightgown on. He's got slippers on, bare feet and slippers. He's holding one of those old-fashioned candle holders with a lit candle on it. In the other hand, he's got his coffee mug. I, I what? And he says, "You happy now?" And I said, "Wait, let me get this straight, Archie. You came down on the subway from the Upper West Side wearing." He said, "Yeah." So
You wanted me here at
he kept
9.
that on. He kept that on all day, and of course, everyone has to go and see Archie's costume, right? And you know why he did it? Morale, just to make
Right.
people. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the kind of guy he was, and could be a little crazy. And the thing is, he looked like such a dignified fellow. You didn't expect him to do crazy stuff.
That's the best when the
So
when the person who seems the most dignified lets their hair down.
yeah, yeah,
It's always the
yeah,
best.
yeah. He was the pratfalls and all that stuff. He was part of the keeping us all good morale.
That's so important.
Great man. I miss him.
I love hearing stories like that. That's good.
Yeah.
We've been talking for over an hour. I haven't even talked to you about the 40th anniversary of Secret Wars. Can we get into that for a little bit?
Sure, yeah, anything you want. I'm sorry I talked too much.
No, I'm more than happy to hear all the stories you can give us. But speaking about the toys and the marketing, everyone knows that the comic book was designed to sell these toys. But much like Korvac Saga, which I recently reread, there's a lot of you put the heroes against these omnipotent characters that basically can't lose.
Yeah.
And it becomes much more of a philosophical story, whether it was the Korvac saga or when you get to the Beyonder. Now, I know that there, with Secret Wars, there were so many plate spinning because the characters that are cast in the story are meant to sell toys as well as the villains, and everything was almost like a commercial. But at the same time, reading Secret Wars, you're making things that have never happened before, as far as like the X-Men and the Avengers and the villains and all of these people intermingle with each other while those books have their ongoing stories taking place. Where did it begin with Secret Wars as far as selling stories? And by the time you get to the end of it, the Marvel Universe has changed drastically forever.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I take exception to the statement that it was like a commercial or an advertisement.
Yeah.
The way it happened
Mm-hmm.
was Kenner Toys made a deal with DC Comics to do superhero action figures.
Mm-hmm.
All of the companies spy on each other. So
Right.
Mattel found out about that. So they, just as a hedge against Kenner, they wanted to have superhero action toys too. So we're the only other game in town. So they came to
Right.
us, and of course they talked to the licensing people first, and the licensing people had never opened a comic book, and so they're looking at their lists and saying, "Well, let's see, we got Ghost Rider, we got Daredevil, and the Mattel people are, we never even heard of these, what?" So, as was often the case, I was asked to come to the meeting, to join the meeting. So I come upstairs and I catch the drift of what's going on. And I said, "Oh no, we got some great characters." And I started telling them about Iron Man and Thor and the Fantastic Four and the X-Men. And I said, and we also have some characters who have had some exposures. Spider-Man has been on television. The Hulk has been on television. A lot of characters have appeared in animation. And they said, "Well, yeah, but even the ones that you've had on television, Mattel, even the ones you had on television, they don't have Q scores like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Robin. Like everybody in the world knows who they are.
Gotcha.
Those were the big four licensing characters." Anyway, I said, "Well, that's true. You know what Q score is? That's how many people you ask 1,000 people.
Right.
If you know this character, and if they 900 say they do, then it's 900." Anyway, so I said, "All right, well, let me run this by you." I said, uh, "The direct market, the comic book people in the comic book market, they buy a lot of toys, a lot of toys." I
That's
said,
true.
"And in the comic book market, in the direct market especially, uh, Marvel outsells DC 5-1, and so people there know these characters. They're
Hmm.
they're not mysterious to anyone in that market,
Right.
and they will buy a lot of toys." Well, I brushed them back a little bit. They said, "Oh, okay," and so then they agreed to do the deal. And but the one of the last things they said to me, they said, "Well, look, is there any way you could get us publicity that would be for regular consumers, not dedicated comics fans? I mean, civilians." And I said, I think I can handle that. I said, how about one big story with all the major heroes and all the major villains in the same story, epic story, 12 issues. And I said, I'll guarantee it'll sell well, and I'll see to it that it gets you publicity. And they said, oh, that'll do. Now, there was no discussion of which characters they were going to use or which characters I was going to use. They had nothing to do with the comic book,
Right.
zero. The name Secret Wars, they did contribute to that, but I was talking to one of their executives, and he was saying that they did a focus group for something else, and that the two kids' two favorite words were secret and wars. I said, huh, secret wars. It's on another planet. Nobody knows, you know.
Perfect. Yeah.
So I used that as the title. And but they had, I never sent them anything to approve. They never asked for anything to approve. We didn't have any authority over approving their toy. I mean, I guess if they had done something injurious to one of our trademarks, we could have, sued them or something, but they didn't, and it was fine. I mean, they gave everybody a shield. Okay, I don't care. All right, so they weren't involved in the comic book, and it certainly wasn't a commercial. It was we just did the best story we could, and it had to be big, and it had to be, epic. I mean, it had to be. If you're going to use characters like Galactus, then you better have somebody who outranks him, who causes it. So I was trying to make it as big as I could. Well, I do know a good bit about the toy business.
Right.
For instance, I knew that there's a regular toy fair around Valentine's Day every year in February in New York City, where all the toy companies gather and they present their stuff, and buyers come from all over to buy the toys for the toy stores. Mattel was sufficiently big that they had their own private toy fair as well in January in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Hmm.
So Secret Wars falls between Marvel's December books that year and the January books. That's where the whole Secret Wars story falls, continuity wise. Now, of course, it comes out one issue a month, but still.
Right.
So, and I decided I wanted to have these characters come back. Some of them changed. Ben Grimm doesn't come back. Colossus comes back after having an affair and, kind of cheating on his girlfriend. And then I had this idea to have Spider-Man get a new costume. So I had that figured out so that the first appearance of the new costume, he goes away in a red and blue. He comes back in a black. So in January, he's wearing a black costume.
Mm-hmm.
Why? So that if we got publicity, every buyer on their way to Scottsdale to go to Mattel's Toy Fair would hear nothing on the news or see nothing in the papers except Secret Wars, Secret Wars, Secret Wars, which they were used for the name of the toy line too. Anyway, so it worked. I mean, when that black costume appeared in Spider-Man 252 in early January, my phone starts ringing off the hook. Major newspapers all over the country and a lot of minor ones, radio stations, TV, all three wire services, all three New York papers, TV and radio in New York. It was a massive publicity sweep. And so Mattel was very happy. So all these buyers are showing up saying, I keep hearing about this thing, Secret Wars, And so they sold in a lot of toys. And then I timed the origin of the black suit for August. Why? Because I got another little burst of publicity, one, and that's when Mattel sells in the Christmas toys. So they were very pleased with me. I got them the publicity they wanted. But other than that, I mean, they didn't tell me anything. I didn't have any marching orders from them, nor would I have paid any attention anyway. I mean,
Right.
we were just trying to make a good story. I mean, I discussed things with their people sometimes. They talk about play sets and this and that, and kind of getting up to speed about how the toy biz. But it was not invasive at all. And
So in your creative process, what I was thinking more about wasn't so much that they made you do this and they picked everything out. It was more that you being the editor in chief of the comics, understanding what they're trying to do. You want a toy set? I'll write something that will make a toy set make sense, and I'll make the Hulk look strong so that a kid will want to play with the Hulk. And Spider-Man's gonna get his moment where he can take out the X-Men because now the kids will say Spider-Man's a cool character. So in my head, it was more you're writing this epic story while at the same time thinking about all of the marketing and all of the news that will come out associated with this. S-
Well,
And
I
it,
was thinking about, yeah, the fact that we could get them publicity, but I mean, I would have done those things anyway. I just, if I had been doing that story and there was no toy line, I would have
right,
done those things because, they were just good story elements. I thought. Claremont was all upset with me. When I let everybody read everything first because I didn't want to mess with these guys. I would like to give them as much leeway as I could, and their editors worked with them.
right,
That's fun. The editor was sort of in those days. Editors actually edited,
yeah,
and so they were sort of the director and producer of the film, and
sure,
and writer and the artist, worked with them. If it was newer guys, the editor might take a bigger hand in it. If it was Walt, nobody had to tell him anything. So at any rate, I was not trying to ram anything down anyone's throat. When Chris read my story where Spider-Man fights the X-Men, he says he's outraged. He says Spider-Man couldn't hold his own against the X-Men. I said, well, I say he could, and I'm the boss. And he said no way. He says all Cyclops has to do is look at him, and he's got him. I said, Chris, if you can find a book in the last 10 years where Colossus has fired at anyone and hit them, unless it's the Blob or somebody who can't be hurt, I said, we'll do it your way. And he's like, uh, because Cyclops never hits anybody. Um, so anyway, he was disgruntled. And then when he read what I wrote, obviously the X-Men do win, and it's about time Professor Xavier did something useful.
right.
Uh, and so he kind of comes to my office. He kind of grudgingly says, "Yeah, it's pretty good." so so he liked it. And the other thing, then I did a favor for him. He had a storyline running in the X-Men where Colossus and Kitty are having this sort of forbidden romance, and no hanky panky, just a
Yeah.
romance. He's older, she's younger, and so when he read the overall plot for Secret Wars, he said, "This is going to take a while." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Then you're going to have to address the relationship between Kitty and Colossus." I said, "I guess so." And he said, "I wish you wouldn't do that." He said, "I really like to finish that story myself." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, Chris, I'll leave Kitty home. How's that?" And he said, "You do that for me?" I said, "Yeah, you're welcome. No problem." And I said, "Throw this in." I said, "I'll have Colossus have a fling on Battle World. How's that?" He said, "Plays right into my hands." I said, "Yeah, you're welcome." But anyways, I mean, I tried to work, but Byrne didn't want to cooperate at all. He's not interested. And I said, "John, it's too bad. You have to." I said, but isn't there something you wanted to do with the Fantastic Four you haven't been able to do yet? He said, "Well, I'd really like to have the She-Hulk replace the Thing for a while." I said, "Okay." I said, "I'm going to leave the Thing on Battle World because he can change back and forth to Ben Grimm there, and there are people there, it's civilization." So he said, "Oh, that's great." And so now he's the big fan of Secret Wars because he gets to use the She-Hulk. But I really tried to work with everybody and try to coordinate and make it really a part of Marvel history, really a significant part of Marvel history in continuity. Because everybody after that, everybody and his brother's doing a giant crossover at
Yeah.
least once a year. And the thing is, most of them it's just some story off to the side that doesn't really count. It's they just put a bunch of characters in there and they fight, and that's it. Crisis was supposed to have a repair the DC universe, and it didn't. So they had kept up. They did another Crisis. They did
Yeah. Every
count
10 years or so, they,
52. It's
yeah.
more less than 10 years. But anyway, the thing is, Secret Wars is really in continuity. It's everything that happened in Secret Wars is reflected in the regular monthly titles, and especially the black suit. And that's you are correct. I did not realize that I was going to have that much impact on the Marvel universe, but it did. And most of that was other people, not me. I mean, I did the suit, did the origin of the suit. The Spider-Man editor and writer asked me, "Well, what do you want us to do with this?" And I said, "Anything you want." I said, "It's obviously alive. It reads his thoughts. It patterned itself after Spider Woman's costume because that was fresh in his mind. Um, I said, and it obviously wasn't dangerous when it went on to him because his spider sense would have alerted him. So take it from there, any way you want to go.
Yeah.
And they come back a little while. They say, we're going to make it a symbiote. I thought that's not the most original idea I ever heard, but I told them they could do anything they wanted, and I wasn't going to renege. I said, okay, symbiote. And the thing is, they knocked it out of the park. I
Yeah.
mean, it wasn't brilliantly original, but boy, they did such a killer job on it,
Yeah.
and became super popular, and like you said, changed a lot of things. So, and then Michelini and McFarlane are the ones that turned it into Venom,
Right.
and
But you
I
need
mean,
the seed, right? You need
well, I got
that
them started,
seedling. Yeah,
and
something to
they
get
ran
things
with the
started.
ball. I got
Yeah.
them started, and then they just took off with it and just made it. It's still around 40 years later.
So again, getting into that, so what kind of this might be too much of a deep question, but it might be much more simpler. What was the kind of philosophical angles that you took with stories like Secret Wars when you come up with a character like the Beyonder? You said you wanted it to be something more scary than what Galactus would represent, but to put the heroes in the Marvel universe, oftentimes I've read stories where it's like they've lost. The only thing that will bring them back is some sort of philosophical moment where, Thanos beats himself because of his ego, or Korvac has a broken heart, if you will. What kind of things were making you create such like characters that you can't beat this guy? So how do we justify the ending?
Yeah, well, I mean that's why you try to get good writers, somebody who can think that through and make it happen. I did the best I could. But I see when I was a kid, I'm reading Stan stuff, you know,
Right, right.
and that guy could make me care as much about Aunt May being sick as the fact that Galactus is going to eat the planet. That's good writing. I mean, you need to put something at stake, and
Mhm,
if it's a 12 issue story, it better be something big,
mhm.
and you better pay off, okay? And so to me, I just kept trying to think it through. What would really happen here? How would this guy react? What would Doom do? He's not going to take things sitting down. He's going to go on the offensive. What would what would the heroes do? Well, they would be as noble under the circumstances as they could, but there was also you know no holds barred, no quarter fight
Right.
because everything was at stake with him. So anyway, I just tried to think it through and try to make it as build powerful moments into it, the kinds of things that would happen. What would really happen here?
Yeah.
Archie used to say, he said, people ask me how I come up with ideas. He says, I like this.
Yeah, everything's happening inside there, right? The battle's being
And
fought. Was it already established at that point within Marvel that Doctor Doom kind of represented the main villain of the Marvel universe? Because everybody had sort of an encounter with Doom, right? You had your trial by fire as a hero. You encountered Doom at some point in time, but was that precedent already set that it was easy for you to say all roads lead to Doom
no,
pretty much?
no, never had to. I mean, everybody liked Doctor Doom as a character because he's a great character. I
Yeah,
mean, in ways, he's noble. He is good to his people.
yeah,
He has a sense of honor,
yeah,
um, and he has the heart of a lion. I mean, he attacked the Beyonder. Okay,
right,
and he's got a lot of interesting dichotomies going on. I mean, the idea of controlling everything and making it better um, is mixed in there with the idea of killing Reed Richards. Guy's got some warped ideas, but basically he's a brilliant man, and he's got some interesting qualities. So he's such a good villain. And when I came to Marvel, Marvel had gone through a period there where all these little fiefdoms had popped up. Everybody thought that whoever was writing the Fantastic Four thought they owned Doctor Doom. Whoever
right,
was
right, right.
writing the X-Men thought they owned Magneto, and also Spider-Man, his villains. And it got kind of bad because then no one was using the other villains and stuff. When I came in, I said, no, Marvel owns these characters. You and you and you don't. I said, and so the answer is if another writer and his editor, his or her editor, they want to use, say, Doctor Doom, the answer is yes. You know, they should come to the editor of the home book for him, which would be the Fantastic Four, and say we want to use a Doctor Doom in a story. The answer is yes. There's no. It might be a later, or could you wait a month, or you'll have to bring him back from the moon, and he's wearing a funny hat, or I mean, whatever. But the answer is it's yes or yes, but. And so you'll see like all over the place in those days. Doom appeared with the X-Men. Dr. Octopus fought Captain America. So did the Wolverine, I think. Tried to make it so that, well, what would really happen here? A lot of these guys all live in New York. They're going to run into each other.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of these villains have world-shaking plans. So they're not going to wait around for the Fantastic Four to come and fix it. And whoever is handy will have a go at it. Anyway.
Right. No, I love hearing the behind the scenes, the talk like you were saying, who would win in a fight between Spider-Man and Wolverine, like that passion of the characters, because the stories that we tell, they do become, as some people might look at it as childish, but there is a modern day mythology that's being created that, maybe 100, 200 years from now, people will read a story like Secret Wars, and it'll mean the way we look at, Egyptian stories or Babylonian mythology could all end up being the same sort of things because the story structure comes back to that same sort of unknown power, that cosmic entity that we're all trying to figure out at the end of the day. So I love when creators and editors talk about that thing about Doom that makes him such an interesting character to go
Oh,
through all the different books. I have a few listener questions before we wrap up, if that's okay. Okay, so BC Scrubs, a loyal listener, he said, what was something that took you by surprise in a good way during your time at Marvel, whether it was a series that did much better than expected or a creator's work that just, was a pleasure to behold it being created?
well, I'll tell you what, I have to say that Frank Miller growing and getting better as fast as he did was just a wonderful thing to watch. I mean, when he first came, he had gone to other places, DC and other places, and he'd just gotten shot down. They said, I mean, when Neil Adams told him, "You're no good. You'll never work in this business. Give it up, kid." And so, when he came to see me, I looked at this stuff. Actually, the first job he got was from Vince Coletta over at DC. After getting ripped apart by Neil, Frank went to see Joe Orlando. Joe Orlando ripped him apart, and Vince saw him looking unhappy and said, "What's wrong with you?" And Frank said, "No, Joe doesn't like my stuff." Vince says, "I'm the art director. Let me see it." And so he did. And I found out later that Vince's opinion was the drawing was a little rough, but the thinking was good.
Hmm.
Well, he gave the only job that Vince could get him right away was a one-page feature page for one of Kanigher's war comics. But he said, "Here, at least it'll pay your train fare back to Vermont." Gave him a job. Well, now he had a job. It was one page, but he had a job. So he went to see Wally Green over at Gold Key Whitman, and Wally Green gave him a seven page Wheelie and the Chopper Bunch job. Now he's two jobs. He said, "Wow." So he comes to see me, the scariest guy of all. And my opinion was just like Vince's. The drawing was a little rough, but some of the thinking was really kind of interesting. And so I gave him a tryout job. He butchered it. And I said, "Well, I'll pay you for this, but we can't use you." And he said, "Why not?" I said, "You didn't do what I told you." I said, "You didn't listen to what I said."
Hmm.
And he looked all disgruntled and stuff. And he said, "Give me another chance." And I said, "Yeah, all right, one more." Turned out that Neil Adams had basically told him, "Ignore whatever editors tell you. Just do it your way." He said, "They're all stupid. They'll just say, 'Oh, that's fine.'" And if Neil had known that I was the editor telling him stuff, he wouldn't have said that because Neil's my friend,
Right.
best friend since 1966. So So anyway, so Frank on the next job, he actually listened and did what I said. And the drawing was still a little rough, but it was, it was the
He's
storytelling was
executing. Yeah.
good. And so he would come in with jobs, along the way there. And before he'd take it to the editor, he'd bring it and show it to me, and I'd go over it with him, point out things. And then also Denny was talking to him a lot of just about writing story, Denny O'Neill, and Denny's Hall of Fame. So the thing is, he just got better by leaps and bounds. It got to the point where you'd mention something to him, and then he had that. That was he understood completely, and he did it right. And then when Denny needed a writer for Daredevil, long story there, but he came in and handed me a plot. He said, "Read this." And I said, "All right." I read it. It was a good O'Neill. What's your problem? He says he has no right to be that good on his first try. I'm like, Miller, you're kidding me, And it was. And so Frank, it just took off like a rocket, man. I can't tell you. I was talking to Chuck Rosansky, Mile High Comics, and he says I think you know what you're doing. He said I'm going to rely on your judgment. He said, who's the next hot guy? I said, Frank Miller, Daredevil. And this is when he would just start now. So Chuck started investing, buying extra copies of Daredevil. Didn't hurt sales, but I mean, he wasn't buying a million of them. He was just, buying. And then one time I was out in Denver, and he insisted on taking me to dinner at this expensive steakhouse. And I said, "What's this all about?" He said, "You cannot believe how much money I made on those Miller books."
Wow.
He says,
Wow.
he trusted my eye for artists, I guess, but seeing that happen,
Right.
watch, and it very quickly went from us teaching Frank, then he knew what he was doing, and then he was teaching us. He was doing things we never thought of. Everybody. You could always tell from the reaction in the office, like what if a book was really good. And every week at Marvel, you'd get what was called the bundle. It went to all the freelancers, it went to all the staff people, and it went to the upstairs people who immediately threw it in the trash. But the bundle would be whatever came out that week, And so you'd see everybody get their bundle, and you see them open it up and sort through it, put Daredevil on top. That's a clue. They all wanted to read Daredevil first.
And there's
And
a lot of good comics at that time. That
yeah,
says a
I
lot.
mean, that says a lot. The fact that there was the other ones that you'd think might have a fighting chance for the top, but they went for Daredevil. So we knew that was a hit. And by the way, we knew the next 3 or 4 or 6 or 8 were hits too.
That's great. Okay. We're gonna fantasize a little bit, but if you were given carte blanche on any creative team, any title, any publisher, what comic would you like to edit now? That's from Meat Trunks. He wants to know
Uh,
if you had your dream team scenario.
wow, I'd have to think about that because I'm not up to speed with all the
You can
current.
pick anybody throughout time. Let's
All
put
right,
it that way.
all right. I think that if I had to pick for one job now.
In one job.
All right.
Get
The
to edit
artist
the
would be
book.
Russ Heath. He can ink his own. The writer would be Archie Goodwin. He's the best. And Tatjana would possibly to color it, but there are some other contenders there. Max Shield, whose real name is Christie, and J.J. Jackson would be candidates. I'd have to figure that out. Also, Steve Olive. Lettering, probably either Orzakowski, if it was going to require any kind of tricky stuff, or if it was just kind of you wanted it clear, legible, and beautiful, I'd pick Jim Novak or John Costanza. Editing that team would be a cakewalk. I mean, it would be so good.
What
Uh,
book would they
I,
do? Is there a character you'd want them to work on, or is just create your own?
well, if I was going to take an existing character and I could pick any character from any company, um, I would really have to think hard to think of anyone other than Superman or Spider-Man
Mm,
because they are the iconic characters.
right.
However, given that it was Russ Heath, and Archie, I'd probably try to pick something more that sort of suited them. Uh, I don't know that. Like I think Harbinger, which I created, would be something I would consider. But I probably have to talk to Goodwin about it, see how he felt about it. But I think he could do anything, and Russ Heath could do anything. Um, and I might just do the Avengers. And I always have a warm spot in my heart for the Legion of Superheroes, and picturing that done by those guys, wow, that would be interesting. So I don't know. There'd be a lot of things I have to work out, but that's kind of where I'd go with it. I think that Russ Heath was a guy that Neil Adams was pretty sure he was great. He was one of the greatest of all time. He
Wow.
would speak with reverence about Russ Heath. He valued him highly. Um,
That says a lot about who Neil Adams would like, 'cause he didn't always like everybody. He was very
no,
specific about who was top of the top class, top notch stuff.
you bet he was, and
And
Russ
he would
was.
know.
Yep, and yes, he had obviously had the awareness to figure that out.
Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for all your time this morning,
Oh,
this afternoon. We haven't even gotten into Valiant Comics. If you're up for it, I'd love to have you back on to just talk about your time creating a brand new universe at Valiant, because I just love those characters so much, and
yeah.
people need to hear about that, because that's some of the best characters in comics, in my opinion. I love them.
Thank you. And whenever you need me, I'll be happy to do it.
That'd be great. Well, everybody, thank you so much for sitting in with us and listening to this episode with Jim Shooter, the legend. We thank you so much for giving your time and your creativity over the years for comic book fans to enjoy forever. Where can people follow you, or if they want to send you a message, is there a place that they could do that?
I do have some social media. I've never actually been there.
That's okay.
I have an assistant, a young lady who's technologically aware, and she her name is Brittany Byram, and I think if you look me up, she has different social media platforms that she posts things on about where I'm going to be and
Right.
anything of interest that pops up, some photos and things.
Are you doing
Uh,
any cons coming up that people might be able to see you?
I'm doing too many. I'm doing
Okay.
too many. I think total this year I probably have 17 or 18 shows.
Are
I
you
made
coming back to Toronto by
uh,
chance?
I was going to, and then Fan Expo, they had some problem. It wasn't to do with me. It was I think they had overcommitted to talent. And I said next year, so that was going to happen, but I don't think probably not till next year.
Okay, well, I'll be looking out for you there, because I always come visit
Okay.
you at your table for Fan Expo
All
or
right.
Comic Con. But everyone listening, don't forget to hit the rate and subscribe button on this on the YouTube channel, and visit omniversecomics.guide, where you can look up the Secret Wars reading list. It's the best one you'll find. Again, read Secret Wars, read Korvac Saga, go back into the Marvel of the late 70s and 80s, and just dive into some of the stuff that this gentleman here was a part of, that creative time.
They're reprinting Secret Wars issue by issue this year. Did you know that?
I
They're
did
doing a
not know
deluxe
that, but
format.
that
It's in a deluxe format. It's the original, but I mean it's on great paper and it's the colors are beautiful and it's got a nice heavy duty shiny cover. And they're doing like a chrome cover version
that's
for each
awesome.
one too. Uh,
Those
and
Mike
yeah,
Zeck
so
covers
I
that
was impressed that they're publishing it not in a trade, but issue by issue, which is
that's
kind of cool.
that's very cool, and deservedly so, right? 40 years, it's left an impact in the
Yeah.
industry and in the storytelling world. So good on you. It's always good to
All
see
right.
those books get the life that they deserve. Everybody, thank you again, Jim. Thank you so much. It's
Thank you.
been a pleasure. We will
And
talk soon.